Welcome back to the U Sports Report, guys. It's time for Out of Bounds. First off, we're going to talk about the WNBA. We don't give them enough love. So here's a bracket of how they're doing so far this season. First off, the Minnesota Lynx, Tyler, have started their season undefeated, 11-0 after beating the Indiana Fever 87-63. That is quite a feat.
Yeah, the Lynx are actually the very first team in WNBA history to start 11-0, and there you see the Sparks sitting at 10-0. They're right behind them. They could potentially match them there with that 11-0 start, but the Lynx are led by Simone Augustus and Maya Moore. Maya Moore averaging nearly 20 points per game, 19.8 if you want to get technical. She's one of those products from UConn, Gino Auriemma coached athlete, and we see time in and time out, these Gino Auriemma girls, the UConn girls, they come out and they are ball players.
They really are. They train, they're not robotic. A lot of people complain that the WNBA is a more robotic version of basketball, but watching some of these girls, especially UConn girls, they play at a really high competitive level, and so they come out and they're very intense on the WNBA basketball court.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, I wouldn't say it's necessarily robotic, but these WNBA players, they clearly don't have the athleticism that the NBA players have. Therefore, they have to use their fundamentals. They have to use their footwork a little bit more. They have to be more refined in their turns and their crossovers, everything else like that, which is great. I mean, we've seen Draymond Green actually come out and say here recently that he watches WNBA film to get his mechanics down and his footwork and stuff. So, yeah, maybe a little bit more slow-paced, but these girls definitely know how to play ball.
They really do. And, you know, when I lived in South Carolina, the college basketball team there had the men and women practicing together to kind of get the girls out of that super structured format. They wanted them to play a little more free and a little looser. And with Draymond complimenting the WNBA like that, that's impressive.
It's big. I mean, it's not, you know, some no-name player in the NBA saying that, oh, I watch WNBA. This is Draymond Green.
Yeah.
You know, this guy has been dominating the storylines for the past few months as far as the NBA landscape goes. So for a big-time player to come out like that and openly admit, not that it's necessarily anything shameful, but it's something, you know, a little unorthodox. I don't think I've ever heard any NBA player say they watch WNBA film to fine-tune their fundamentals, and I think that's genius.
It really is. It gives him maybe an edge up on some other athletes, especially guys that he's competing with for that star power.
Now, moving along from the WNBA, we have a couple of big soccer tournaments going on, one taking place across the pond, one taking place right here in the United States. The one going on here in the States is the Copa America Centenario, which is the 100th anniversary of the Copa America. Now, coming into this one, Brazil were the prohibited favorites along with Argentina. Now, we're going to show you a clip from this Brazil and Peru game. Brazil has to win or draw to advance to the knockout stages. And you see here, that is a handball, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yeah.
In soccer, you cannot use your hand. Peru gets away with one. They would actually go on to win this game 1-0, and you see Bruno Alves, the Brazilian keeper, pleading to the referee saying, dude, that's a handball.
Yeah.
This is called football.
Yeah.
You know, so Brazil actually ended up getting eliminated from the Copa on that handball call, very controversial, and after that, they actually fired their manager, Kimberly.
Wow, that's some big moves.
It's big moves, especially considering that they are hosting the Olympics later on in the month. Of course, their soccer team will be playing now. This Brazil team, they didn't have the likes of Neymar, they didn't have Kaká, but they did have a lot of star players, Coutinho, Willian, they had Dani Alves. This team was loaded, and for them to lose to Peru, Peru, I mean, Peru is they're a decent soccer country, but when you look at the world rankings, they're in the 70s. Brazil is in the top 5.
Yeah.
So this was just a huge non-call on the handball.
A big blow to their ego for sure.
Definitely. Let's see. I honestly think that's going to fire them up heading down to the Olympics in Rio.
I would love to see that. I would really love to see them take that loss to Peru for such a controversial reason and take that into the Olympics and really play a lot harder than they have been and really remind people why they're in the top 5.
Exactly now. So Brazil is out of the Copa America. Good news, ladies and gentlemen. The red, white, and blue are still in. Let's go ahead and have a look at their last game, taking on Paraguay. as we'll start it off here in the 11th minute. Paraguay on the break, a beautiful through ball, 3-on-1. John Brooks comes in with the perfectly timed tackle. John Brooks, 23 years old.
Again, another 23-year-old athlete reminding us, Tyler, that we may be young, but we have a long way to go to be nearly as successful as they are.
And here we see Jossie Zardes getting down the flank, gets the cross inside. He's gonna find the man, Clint Dempsey, who has seemingly been the U.S. men's national team's savior over about the last 5 years, I'd say, since Landon Donovan kind of started trailing off. Jurgen Klinsmann clearly excited now. This is a big moment for the United States. Just after halftime, or excuse me, just before halftime, Guzan with a very beautiful save, and Paraguay knowing that they're knocking on the door now. This is the one I was talking about. Just after halftime, DeAndre Yedlin comes in with a bad timed tackle. He'll receive a yellow card now. If he gets another yellow, he's out of the game. This was the ensuing play. Yedlin comes in again, gets another yellow card. He's ejected. Jurgen Klinsmann obviously not happy with his right wing back. Now moving on to the 62nd minute. The USA are playing one man down. It's 10-on-11 out there. Paraguay clearly has the advantage here, but the U.S. on a break. Clint Dempsey up top. Actually, that's Bobby Wood. He's going to get it off to Zardes. Jossie, not today, as he was stone cold. And there you see the American Outlaws in disbelief. I love Jurgen Klinsmann. His reactions are priceless.
He always looks so frustrated, but also excited. Like, it's a really interesting emotional combination.
And here's Brad Guzan standing on top of his head, ladies and gentlemen. He's like, what is that meme that's always on Facebook? You shall not pass.
Yes, definitely. You know, I watched this USA game at Saggio's, and it was an intense moment. So many people in Saggio's screaming and shouting at every single play. Soccer is one of those sports that you watch it completely or you don't really watch it at all. You have to be invested in watching because it's so intense and very fast-paced. And I could never do it. I have to give mad props to those guys, especially the goalies. They've got a big job.
Oh, of course. I mean, these soccer players run anywhere up to 12 miles per game, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to a football player, I mean, yeah, the sports are totally different. There's a lot more contact in American football as opposed to European football, we'll call it for now. But just the endurance that these guys have to go through, even the referees, Kimberly, these referees have to pass a fitness test where they have to run 12 miles in under 75 minutes. Could you imagine that?
I couldn't do it, let alone imagine it. I don't even want to think about it because that sounds like way too much running.
Now, getting back to that USA display, we told you they played one man down for virtually the entire second half. For their defense to hold tight like that, led by John Brooks, the 23-year-old U.S. men's national team defender, it was big. It was a big step for the United States. A lot of people were doubting their potential coming in to this Copa America. I mean, they didn't do very well in qualifying. Jurgen Klinsmann has been known to switch out his starting 11 over and over, seemingly not giving anybody, any chemistry, any chance to build chemistry.
Yeah.
When you look at this U.S. team this year compared to the World Cup squad from just a couple of years ago, I think it's about half different.
Yeah, it really is. And you see a lot more energy on the field when these guys have that opportunity to build those relationships with their teammates. It's really important for them to have that. And we've talked about it in the past with a lot of other sports. So for them America to really struggle with that, especially coaching staff deciding, moving people around quite a bit, it's really impressive for them to have made such a big mark this year.
Very impressive. They've moved on to the knockout stages. They'll be facing Ecuador tonight. Actually, if you want to flip over to ESPN after our show ends, that game's going to be on. But please, don't leave us just yet. We got lots more to come for you. Now, moving on to our next soccer topic, Russia versus England. This was very controversial. There were fights between the Russian and English fans prior to the game. After the game, there was reports of police and basically SWAT forces having to come out and separate these fans out in the streets of France using tear gas to disperse these guys. The Russian fans, they were just out of control. Here you see at the end of the Russia-England match, the Russian fans, they were wearing balaclavas. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's like a ski mask, basically. They flooded to the England fan side, and they literally started beating them, tearing down all of their flags. The Russian fans showing just I'd say the absolute worst display of sportsmanship that I may have ever seen in soccer.
Yeah, I could not agree more. You know, it's a really big disappointment to see these guys get so aggressive, and for what? It really doesn't do anything for your soccer team, and it definitely doesn't make you look good as a country or as a fan base. It's really nothing that you should be doing at all.
Yeah, and you were just seeing the interviews that they were conducting with the English fans. Even kids were involved in these, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the FIFA handed down a suspended disqualification to the Russian team, meaning if their fans act up one more time, the team will be disqualified from the tournament.
See, and again, another thing, it doesn't do anything for your team, and that team wasn't involved in those brawls, but they're going to be the ones that suffer because of it.
Very unfortunate, very unfortunate. Now, transitioning from football over to football, Brandon Marshall has signed a 4-year, $32 million extension, and that guarantees $20 million for him. Now, we're not talking about the receiver Brandon Marshall. We're talking about the linebacker Brandon Marshall that plays for the Broncos. Now, that's a lot of money, Kimberly.
You know, he told reporters, I will earn every penny, and of this contract, $20 million guaranteed. That's a lot of pennies. A lot of work he's going to need to put in to earn those pennies. But I don't know. The Broncos have quite a year ahead of them, having had such a successful year last year. Peyton's gone, and we see some big changes on their roster. So Brandon's going to be someone that they definitely look to for support.
And I think this was a great move by the front office, John Elway specifically, who is the general manager of the Denver Broncos. They lost some key pieces to that defense in free agency this year, Malik Jackson, one of them. They still have Von Miller, who's sort of holding out over contract negotiations.
Yeah.
He is their best player, ladies and gentlemen. They need Von Miller to sign that contract. They still have DeMarcus Ware. They still have Aqib Talib, who we just covered last week. Suffered a gunshot wound. We're not entirely sure how he suffered that wound, but this was a big signing for the Broncos. We saw their defense carry them last year when Peyton Manning wasn't doing anything. Brock Osweiler stepped in, viable backup quarterback, but he was exactly that. He was a backup. How do you think the Broncos will fare this season?
You know, we watch as Osweiler goes to the Texans this fall. Peyton's officially retired. Like you said, a number of their defensive players are no longer on their roster or are holding out for contracts. It's going to be an interesting year for the Broncos because last year their offense was a little weaker than we've seen in the past, especially with Peyton not really showing up and being a leader when he needed to be. Granted, they made it really far into the season, but with a team like that, when you don't have that consistency as the Broncos that we know and love, it's going to be a really interesting year for them having to face off against some big names. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars play the Broncos this year. Going to be an interesting matchup, I think, but a really great game for the Jaguars to really show up with their defense and their brand new defense, including one Broncos player this year as well.
Yeah, Malik Jackson, he made the jump over to Jacksonville. Now, you just touched on players holding out for contract negotiations. This one you don't typically hear of. Joey Bosa, he's been skipping the mandatory Chargers mini camps over his contract negotiations. Now, if you're saying, why is this unheard of? Joey Bosa is a rookie. He has not played one down in the NFL, and for him to be holding out like that, what do you think that says about his personality, Kimberly?
You know, we've talked about it so many times. These guys need the opportunity to build these bonds, these relationships, and this is not only a great time for rookies, but the entire team to really work on their fundamentals, work together and see what everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, and really work with those things and build a better roster for it. Joey not being there for those mini camps might make a huge impact on the team's success in the fall, and I think that him being so young and being so aggressive with this, it's not looking good for him. And the team making him so many big offers, negotiation differences is one thing for someone who's definitely proven themselves a couple years in a row or more. But Joey, like you said, a brand new rookie, just barely got drafted less than a month or two ago. And we're seeing him already be this big of a pain in the butt for the team. It's going to be something we're going to have to watch out for.
And I don't really think it's going to sit well with the veterans on this team. As
Definitely
we've stated numerous times, he's a rookie. He's not even played it down. And this year, it's showing the team that he's looking out for himself. To me, it says that he's selfish.
It really does.
You know, I want my money, and I don't want this much money. I want this much money. So I think there could potentially be a little rift in the locker room whenever he does get in there. What do you think?
You know, I definitely agree. Their general manager said that they're disappointed that he's not at these mini camps. It is a mandatory mini camp, like you mentioned. And for him to not be there, these veterans on the team are looking at him and definitely thinking he's very selfish. We've talked about the number of selfish athletes in the industry of every single different sport. When you become a selfish athlete and you haven't done enough to prove it, those veterans who have worked really hard to earn their names and put those names on the back of those jerseys and sign those checks every week, they're going to be really disappointed.
Now, just one more footnote to get here for you. Totally something that would happen to the Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys running back Darren McFadden broke his elbow, ladies and gentlemen, trying to save his new iPhone from hitting the ground. Hashtag first world problems. That's all we have for you right now. We'll be right back with more of the U Sports Report.